U.S. President Donald Trump has been presiding over the first meeting of his controversial Board of Peace in Washington, D.C., with the focus on Gaza. Those attending promised a bright future for the Strip, pledging money, peacekeeping troops, and investment, but with few political details. The board brings together representatives from more than 24 nations, aiming to resolve global conflicts. But many countries are absent, including key European allies. The Board of Peace has also been criticized by governments who worry it will undermine the United Nations. Trump says he will make sure that the UN remains viable.
You can get away with that. But she just went. But this meeting today is proof with determined leadership nothing is impossible. When I took office, the war in Gaza was raging with thousands of people being killed and no end in sight. Today, thanks to unrelenting diplomacy and the commitment of many of the great people in this room, we have 59 countries signed up on Gaza. Think of that. We have, it's amazing. But all the people, many, really so many in this room, the war in Gaza is over. It's over. There are little flames. Hamas has been, I think they're going to give up their weapons, which is what they promised. If they don't, it'll be, they'll be harshly met, very harshly met. They don't want that. All this stuff like they don't mind dying. They told me that's not true. Everyone said, oh, they don't mind dying. No, they don't want to die. They said, we don't want to die. People don't want to die. The ceasefire was held, and every last remaining hostage, both living and dead, has been returned back home. Think of that. That was an impossibility.
So let's take a closer look at the announcements made during the inaugural meeting of the Board of Peace. Members are promising $7 billion for reconstruction. That's well short of the estimated $70 billion needed to rebuild the devastated Strip. Indonesia, Morocco, Kazakhstan, Kosovo, and Albania have committed troops for what will eventually be a 20,000-strong international stabilization force. Turkey has also pledged to contribute troops. That's in addition to a Palestinian police force of 12,000 to be trained by Egypt and Jordan. It was announced at the board meeting that the recruitment opened on Thursday and 2,000 people have already applied. Joining me here on set is Sultan Barakat. He's a professor of public policy at Hamad Bin Khalifa University. And we're also joined from Tel Aviv by Dan Perry. He is an Israeli politics analyst and former chief editor of the Associated Press in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. We want to thank you both very much for being here. Sultan, let's start with you, though. We're talking here about big plans and big money. But as Hani said, we've been talking about this for a very long time. So what happens after the meeting? There's no talk about how we actually get this money on the ground and get from A, which is where Hani is, where people can't get cooking gas or water or even a place to live, to resorts on a Riviera and an economic boom for everyone in Gaza. How long does that take, and what's the disconnect here?
I think it's going to take a long time. And the disconnect is the following, that they were not clear where the money is heading to. Is this money to shore up the Board of Peace, which, if you listen carefully to what Trump was saying, it's not just about Gaza. He's talking about world peace and his achievements and him going to be, as a person, the chair of this, not as the president of the United States, for a long time to come. And he's raising and he's committed, public money from the United States to support, basically, I think, a private arrangement for his retirement in the years to come. Or is it about the Gaza reconstruction, which is probably what Qatar and Saudi and potentially maybe Indonesia have in mind when they promise to make a contribution? Or is it going to be linked to the United Nations and particularly to the World Bank? The World Bank spokesperson there offered the service of the bank. He's not going to contribute money because the bank does not recognize Palestine as a state yet. They're willing to manage the money on behalf of the board within Gaza. So it's really very, very vague. And as you heard from your correspondent on the ground, what people need now is almost that list of wishes that Ali Shaath presented reversed. They really now need their own security, not security in the sense of being forced on them by others. They need the much more humanitarian assistance, housing, return to their homes. No one has addressed what about land ownership, property ownership. Where would these people return to? It's very, very complex in the Gaza Strip. Some 70% of the population were refugees from 1947 and 1967, living in refugee camps. What will happen to those people? By presenting the board as they did, what they're doing effectively is bypassing 80 years of UN resolutions.
Right.
And saying that, as Trump put it, the orthodoxy way did not work, so now we have to do it another way.
Right.
And he has ignored on purpose that it was the United States who crippled that orthodoxy. I mean, the United Nations and its resolutions, there's nothing wrong with them, they're legal. It's the implementation that was always hampered by the United States and its veto power.
So there is a long way to go from A to B, in short, there. And Dan, I want to bring you in Tel Aviv. There's a number of countries here who have pledged troops to train Palestinian police, to be members of the stabilization force. But surely they will be concerned about the number of issues that there have been with the ceasefire, the number of strikes that have been going on since this began in October, and the number of people who have died in them. Will Israel see a need to change those actions if this is going to succeed and if this is going to move forward? Because surely they won't want to send their troops and their people if there is this threat of Israeli bombardments while they're there.
Israel claims that the continuing violence has to do with skirmishes that Hamas starts, and I'm not in a position to judge to what degree that's true or untrue. Hamas remains on the other side of the yellow line. They're armed. They're not above provoking Israelis. Israelis are very much not above firing back. Mistakes can happen. It's a messy, messy, horrible situation, and I think Israel understands very well that the violence has to cease before the ISF goes in and before the technocratic government can take over. But I know that Israel will also say that none of that is likely to happen until Hamas credibly steps down as an armed force in Gaza. And I really do believe that all these plans being made in Gaza, whether it's the billions pledged, whether it's the security force that 5 Muslim countries have volunteered to man that's about to go in, whether it's American bases that I hear are going to be set up in the perimeter, all this stuff that has the potential to rebuild Gaza, despite all the complications that Dr. Barakat rightly points out. But certainly it would be a great idea to start the rebuilding and to bring in unimpeded humanitarian and other aid. None of it will happen unless that clause of the 20 in Trump's plan that says that Hamas is disarmed and steps down is implemented. I think we're doing the situation a disservice unless we focus on this. Hamas said just last week, in the form of Khaled Mashal's statement, that they will not. If they do not, then everything we just saw in Washington is for naught. And it would be extraordinary because Trump, however much one might mock and ridicule the Board for Peace, and I tend to agree again with Dr. Barakat that it's hard to imagine Trump in the future as some kind of peacemaker post-presidency that is truly respected by the rest of the world. Nonetheless, I believe what happened in Washington today represents something of a global consensus, including in the Arab world, that they want this to happen. And at the same time, it simply won't happen unless Hamas steps down. Yet all these people that sound knowledgeable say, well, that will never happen. So we're at an impasse. And if we want to be constructive right now, I think all energies need to focus on how to get past that impasse. And trust me, it is not about getting the IDF to have a less light trigger finger in their skirmishes with Gaza along the yellow line. It is in resolving this issue. And all focus needs to be on that, primarily for the benefit of the Palestinians, because I really don't see how 2 million people can continue living in these conditions that we see on the video right now on the screen. It is an outrage, it is inhumane, it is inhuman, and it has to stop. But I see no one contributing a shekel, nor a dinar, nor a dollar, until the condition of Hamas stepping aside is fulfilled. That's a tragic situation, and that's the challenge at hand.
And I'll put that to you, Sultan. Do you agree that that is the next step here, briefly, that Hamas needs to disarm before this moves forward?
The only way to disarm Hamas is to deprive it from the cause of resistance. And the cause of resistance is linked to the occupation, be it in Gaza or in the West Bank. So Israel has got to mature and accept that in the 21st century, occupation is unacceptable. It has been unacceptable for the United Nations. And I think the same board will reach the same conclusion a few months down the line, that it is not possible to progress anything with the status quo in terms of oppression and occupation of the Palestinians. But also Israel has, over the last 2 years, financed and organized militias that are acting against Hamas and causing a lot of chaos in the Gaza Strip. Many of them operate across the yellow line, and they come in and out, and they are the ones who've been attacking the aid, the convoys, and so on. So Israel has got much more control on the possibility of security in the Gaza Strip, and on ways to make sure that Hamas runs out of arguments. You know, they can. It's in their hand, really, to make sure that Hamas in a position where they can give up their arms. Hamas has made it very, very clear repeatedly that their existence is linked to resistance. The moment there is no reason for that, there's no reason for them to exist. And they're willing to give the authority to the Palestinian Authority. Also, even that is not acceptable to Israel. Until now, they haven't accepted the Palestinian Authority to move in. Ali Shaath, although he was a former official of the PA, he does not represent the PA in this current arrangement. So the Palestinian Authority has been totally isolated. And that does not help build the two-state solution, which everybody is accepting as the way forward. And for that, I think we need to look again carefully why Europeans did not join in this peace board. Why we could also go back to the Vatican. The Vatican made a very clear declaration for the justice for the Palestinians as a condition for them to consider any future steps.
And Dan, I want to go to you quickly before we go. That is one thing that was not mentioned very much in this meeting, was the eventual leading of all of this to a two-state solution or to self-determination for Palestinians. What did you make of that?
Well, I'm not surprised because, of course, Israel, the current government of Israel, will not go along with that. However, it's sort of baked into the 20-point plan that if everything works, then diplomatic process restarts, that everyone understands will lead to a version of the two-state solution, which I would favor, and I think most people of good faith certainly want to see happen. I need to take exception with the idea that Hamas needs to stick around because of occupation. This entire edifice that we're discussing today is to end the Israeli occupation of Gaza, and Israel would withdraw, and in favor of the ISF and the local technocratic government, which is very clearly an extension of the Palestinian Authority. And you heard Ali Shaath today speaking, I am sure, as the proxy of the PA, saying that they need one law, one authority, one weapon. And that means that Hamas has to step aside now and not make up excuses about the need to continue resistance. The resistance would be to the PA.
I apologize, Dan. We have to leave it there. Dan Perry in Tel Aviv and Sultan Barakat here with me in Doha. Thank you both for being with us.
Don't miss out and get the full picture. Subscribe to Al Jazeera for reliable news and expert insights. Like, share, stay ahead.